Mike Peterson, I'm here today with Saiyam and something released recently. I think we're going to take a look at it. So, Saiyam, what are you here for today? You're going to show us something cool?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we are here on the vCluster YouTube channel to talk about the latest and the greatest vCluster release. So vCluster released the 0.23 version with two main cool things. One is the Kubernetes 1.32 support, and one is the syncing. So now vCluster with vCluster 0.23, you can sync from host two important resources, which is configMaps and secrets. Now, this opens up a lot of possibilities. Before that, it was a bit tricky how you will get those secrets and you have to use integrations and stuff like that. But now it's native and it's pretty simple. As you can see on the screen, you just create a simple YAML file, enable those from host secret or config maps, and then you change that. Uh, for example, let's take a scenario that you have a host Kubernetes cluster, and then you create all your secrets on the host Kubernetes cluster, and you have integrated that to external secrets solution like external secrets operator, or you have Vault integrated. So you have the external secret management system that is taking care of the encryption and all that stuff. But all your secrets now are there in the host cluster. And with the vCluster 0.23, you can sync those on the host cluster inside the virtual cluster, and you can also change the mapping. So you can have it under a different namespace inside the virtual cluster. So whatever is there on the host cluster will appear inside the virtual cluster. You delete inside the virtual cluster, it will again create from the host cluster. You delete inside the host cluster, vCluster deletes it inside the virtual cluster as well. So that's how cool it is, and it's there for both config maps and secrets. I think I'm very excited about this. It's open source, so everyone using the open source vCluster can take advantage of this.
You got a demo or something for us? You can see this in action?
Yeah, I would love to show you a cool demo on how it works and how you can try it out. And the best part is I will be using Killer Coda Kubernetes Playground so that if you want to try it out later, you can do the exact same steps and you'll be able to create and replicate what I have shown in this particular video. So this is the gist. We'll put all the links in the description of the video. So first is like you see your cluster is up and running and get the cluster info, and you see if Helm is installed or not. Important part is getting the Loft chart. So let's get that. Killer Coda comes with kubectl get nodes and the Helm, so you don't have to worry about that. All those are there. So we'll do Helm repo add Loft and add the chart and Helm repo update. The next step now is important because we are creating a vCluster YAML specification where we have to specify one thing, which is the from host. So we say we want to sync from host secrets, and we are enabling it. So this enables the from host secret sync. And now this is the interesting part where we are putting the mappings. So we are saying that from the default namespace inside the host cluster, it is synced to my namespace user env inside the virtual cluster. So let's do that. It's done. Let's create this particular file. So we now have the vCluster values file created. We'll create a namespace, kubectl create namespace, vCluster namespace is created. The next step is to do the Helm install using the vCluster values YAML file that we created. So since the release is not there, it is installing, and now the usual virtual cluster stuff, kubectl get pods hyphen and vCluster, you will be able to see that it is initializing the stateful set inside the host cluster. Till now, we are inside the host cluster itself, and we'll wait for the pods to come up. Meanwhile, since it's plain Killer Coda environment, it doesn't have vCluster as well, so we'll install the vCluster CLI. So let's do that. It's a simple Perl command to get the vCluster CLI. And now we wait for the virtual cluster to actually come up. Let's clear, and we see it's almost running, getting ready. So all of our stuff is there. It's doing the final checks. I mean, I can do a hyphen watch, but I don't really like that. So which is why I'm just doing the
I
up
spam it
arrow
too.
and enter.
Always spamming it. It feels more forceful because you get to hit enter
Yes.
instead of just sitting there and watching.
All right. So we have stuff up and running. And now what we'll do is we'll connect vCluster connect, and it will start a proxy container. It will create a kubeconfig file of the virtual cluster, merge it with the kubeconfig file, and create a new context for us, which we'll be able to switch between the vCluster and the host cluster, which is important because we haven't yet created a secret inside the host cluster, which is our next step. All right, so kubectl config get context. So let's switch back to host one, use context, and create this particular secret. So we are creating a secret shared user env in the default namespace. So it is created, and I did a hyphen o YAML of that, and you can see how it is coming up. Let's clear the screen. Now we need to verify whether the secret exists inside the vCluster. So what we'll do is kubectl get context and switch to the virtual cluster context. Kubectl config use context kubectl get secrets hyphen a, and you can see we have the my namespace user env secret. And if you see here, that's what we specified. So we specified from the default shared user env of the host cluster, it will sync to the virtual cluster as my namespace user env. And this is what it did. So let's do that. kubectl get secrets hyphen n. It is there, hyphen o YAML. It is there. You have the DB path and DB user. I've cleared the screen, so not visible from what was the earlier one. Let's also create a pod inside the virtual cluster to see um, it in action. So it's a simple pod with in the namespace, my namespace, busybox container, sleeping, and then environment secret from name user env. So that's the secret that it will pick up. kubectl apply, and then we should have the secrets, which are the ones that we created here. Admin password 123, admin password 123. That's how easy and that's how cool it is. And these are the options to delete the cluster. Yeah, it deserves the claps. Yes, it does.
It works.
So yeah, this is how cool it is, and this is how easy it is. So there's this very simple file which is the values. You just say secrets are enabled, and you can specify the mappings, and you can have your, like I said previously as well, you can have your secret solution on your host cluster and use the same for creating the secrets. The admin uses that, and it is sent inside the virtual clusters. It is also there for configMaps. Like Mike, do you actually want to try the configMap one?
Yeah, let me show a demo. I don't actually create a pod, so I could stop short of the showing the coolness of actually pulling it in, but I'll show how to do a config map real quick. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start by seeing what namespaces we have on our host cluster. So kubectl get namespaces. We don't have a namespace for our vCluster yet, so what we'll do is we'll create the namespace for it, just so that we can control like what the namespace is gonna be that we're creating. So create namespace vCluster demo. All right, so now we got a namespace vCluster demo. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a config map on the host cluster in that namespace. But let's go ahead and see what's in that config maps first. All right, so in our config map, it's very simple. We're just naming it vCluster demo config, and we're just saying in the data, it's going to show us a version and the version number. I want to share that up to our users so they know which version of vCluster they're using, just in case they want to, or they actually know that they're using vCluster instead of a base cluster. All right, so we'll go ahead and create that. So kubectl create config map, and then we'll put in the namespace vCluster demo. All right, so get all. Let's get config map namespace vCluster demo. And we'll just see if it's there. Yep, it's there. And then what we can do is we can describe it to make sure it's actually got the information demo config namespace vCluster demo. All right, cool. So we've got this version 0.23. All right, and then we can also do something fancy, right? Like if you want to see the data, if you want to output it into JSON. So we'll do that. Just so we're going to use the same command when we get into the actual vCluster. All right, so now we're actually on the host cluster, right? So default host cluster, we need to create a virtual cluster, and then we're going to share that information up with it. So my actual vCluster configuration is a little bit more stuff in here than what you're normally going to do, right? Like I'm actually doing ingress too, so I can access it outside of doing port forwarding. But the main part we're actually interested in here is the syncing, and we're going to sync from hosts. We're doing ingress classes, separate thing, but configMaps. What we can do is we can enable this, and we're going to say, hey, go find this config map in the vCluster demo namespace, and it's named vCluster demo config, and then sync it to my vCluster into the default namespace, vCluster demo config. That way, when my user has their vCluster configured and set up, they'll be able to see this config map in their default namespace, and they can pull the information from it and either use it in a pod, or we're just going to share information up to them that they need to actually know about. But set an environment variable to say which version of vCluster it is. Not very useful, but at least it kind of shows you how it works. So let's go ahead and create the vCluster in the vCluster demo namespace, and we're going to use our vCluster YAML file. And it's going to take a second to come up, and then we're going to, so right here, we're actually connecting to it. So we are port forwarding. We can say, connect equals false if we want to use the ingress and actually connect over that way and use the kube config. But for the most part, when you're creating a virtual cluster, you're probably just going to use the port forwarding and connect to it that way. So as soon as it comes up, we're going to go ahead and look at our context and make sure they're actually connected to the vCluster. And then I'll show you where the config map is. So short time later, right? Like short time later, several minutes later. It's not even several minutes, like about several seconds later. Okay, that sounds good anyways. I like that. That's pretty good. I'm not adding all this. Okay, cool. So now we're forwarded. So let's go ahead and actually, I'll open up another tab. Now that we're in this other tab, we're going to look at the context, and we are connected to the vCluster. And what we can do is we can kubectl get config map, and we'll see that config map is now within the virtual cluster. So we're not on the host cluster anymore. We're in the virtual cluster. The config map has been synced. And what we can do is we can describe it to get the information, or we can use that handy little, pipe to JSON or send it to JSON and actually pull the data too. But this is a config map that exists on the host cluster that is being synced into the virtual cluster, so you can share information with your users or give them configuration options they need for their environment variables, stuff that's probably not super secret, right? Like you just want configuration options and stuff like that. So you can do secrets, you can do config maps, you can do more, but that's basically the demo showing off the config map. What you got, Siam? You got anything else for us? You want to talk about anything else?
That was awesome, Mike. So I think now, if you have watched the video till the end, which is good, so you have got a gist of what vCluster 0.23 brings to you and how you can try out the fromHost syncing for the secrets and the config maps for the open source vCluster 0.23 version. If you happen to try out and you face any issues, make sure to check out our Slack, join it, and ask questions. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, we are doing the Multitenancy March series. The first session happened today, actually before, because the video is coming out Friday. So the session was on Thursday, but we are having it next week as well. And we'll be having 4 more sessions in this particular series, which we'll put the link in the description. Also, we'll be there at KubeCon. So if you happen to be at KubeCon, make sure to connect with the Loft Labs team over there, and we'll be having a vCluster booth, and we'll be happy to chat with you for multi-tenancy in Kubernetes with vCluster. Well, that's it from Mike and me for the vCluster 0.23. I hope you liked the video. If yes, then please do like, share, comment, and all the usual stuff. Thank you so much. Bye.